Welcome, everyone, to the Healthy School Food Summit, brought to you by the Coalition for Healthy School Food and PlantPure. I'm your host, Ron Gandiza. In this session, we are honored to have with us Dilip Barman. Dilip is a Food for Life instructor and has been teaching the Food for Life Kids Health Curriculum through several schools and a summer camp at a farm animal refuge for several years. He also teaches a quarter-long middle school class called Health Food Choices. Dilip borrows from a number of sources, including Food for Life, the Coalition for Healthy School Food, and a variety of multimedia and published materials on whole food, plant-based nutrition. For the school year 2016 and 17, Dilip piloted a new program in one elementary school called the Healthy Snack Program. Welcome, Dilip. How are you?
Thanks, Ron. It's delightful to be here.
I've heard so much about you. Of course, we've met at a number of events.
Sure.
And your Thanksgiving dinner, vegan Thanksgiving dinner is
You've never made it to it, have you?
No, because it's so packed. There's so many people. We'll talk about that as well in this. But before we get started, I'd love to learn more about your backstory. What started you on this path of plant-based living?
Well, there's several steps. So my parents are immigrants. My mom and dad immigrated from India, and back when they came from India, there was almost nobody in this country from India. They were really pioneers. There literally were hundreds, maybe a few thousand people from India back then. Nowadays, we all know people from the subcontinent, but back then it wasn't the case. So my parents have always been vegetarian, but I was brought up in first rural Ohio, and then big city Chicago, and then a few other places. And when I was in Ohio, we lived in a multifamily home, and in the ground floor was a wonderful old Italian woman who became my grandma. And every time at dinner, because of course I was such a cute kid, like all children are, every time at dinner she would yell up, "Manja, Dilip, manja," and ask me to join her for dinner, and my parents obliged. So I never asked my parents, but my guess is that, most men aren't the primary chefs in their houses. Of course I am. And most Americans, they figured, were meat eaters. And so I would eat whatever my Grandma Sapienza would serve me, including dead animals. But there was always something wrong with eating dead animals. My parents were Hindu, and it was considered not just, in their mind, unethical, although they let their child eat meat, but ritually unclean. And so the times I would eat meat, I'd have to then wash my lips with soap. I would occasionally go out to McDonald's and places like that, but I would always have to wash after eating such food. So Ron, my background is I actually did eat meat growing up occasionally, and then more so in college when I was living on my own. But the transition happened in my second year of college. So I was preparing. The school I went to didn't have a cafeteria for your second year. So I was getting settled in, and part of settling in was grocery shopping. And that's when I made the connection. I was shopping and I saw, in the meat aisle, and it was very clear to me this was a dead animal. And I knew that I didn't have to eat animals to survive. My family was a testament to that. My family never had eaten animals. And I said, do I really want to eat this food? And I decided I didn't need to. So I became a vegetarian in college. And I enjoyed being a vegetarian, and I slowly learned to cook. And then in graduate school, I remember you were talking about my Thanksgiving, Ron. In graduate school, I was in Rhode Island, and somebody in the department invited me to their Thanksgiving. There was a group called the Rhode Island Animal Coalition or something like that. It was an animal rights group, and they had a big Thanksgiving. And it was a vegan Thanksgiving. And Ron, that was the first time I heard the word vegan. I went. I enjoyed the food. And I picked up literature and I read it. And the literature was very clear, whether for ethics, environment, or your own health. By far the best choice you can make is to be plant-based. Okay? And I wasn't yet familiar with whole food plant-based, but at least plant-based. And I got it. I was vegan. I understood what vegan meant. I wasn't vegan, but I got it. So go ahead some years. It was a transition for me. I moved to this area, to Raleigh-Durham, Chapel Hill, and became involved with the local vegetarian society. And eventually I started running the vegetarian society. And I would give lectures on vegetarianism. And I was always honest about it. I always said the ideal diet really is a vegan diet. But I was honest, and I said, but I'm not quite there yet. And I didn't really think I would get there. I was, I guess, addicted to cheese. But slowly I was giving it up. And one day I stopped eating it entirely, and I became vegan. So I was educated in terms of why vegan. It just took me a little while to get there. So that's my journey from an occasional meat eater to maybe a heavier meat eater in college, to being to becoming a vegetarian, to being exposed to veganism, to talking the talk but not walking it, and then being a vegan. And then the journey goes a little bit further. I'm so indebted to Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. And at my wife's behest, I took the training for becoming a Food for Life instructor. And I'm always humbled with all the instructors. They're all so knowledgeable about nutrition and about cooking. And now about 3-4 years ago, I became a Food for Life instructor, and I took the journey a little further beyond veganism to understanding the health impact of things like oils and fats. And so now at home we eat almost exclusively no added fat, whole food, plant-based diets.
Tell us a little more about the Food for Life program, because I know that impacted you in your activities since then. And a lot of people, especially a lot of teachers watching this, may not know what the program's about.
Food for Life is a phenomenal program. Last I checked, there was about 200 of us. We're in many of the states, and we also live in other countries. We have people in Canada. I think there's an instructor in Australia. There's some in Europe. I had training with a gentleman from China. And it's based on the premise that we have so much evidence, just so much evidence. People who are watching this podcast know that. Michael Greger is probably the best example. If you go to Nutrition Facts, there's just so much documented scientific evidence that a plant-based diet is extremely helpful. So Neil Bernard is he's the one who started the Physicians Committee. So he and his team put this program together. We have courses in cancer, which was the first class, the Cancer Project. There's a diabetes class. There's a weight management class, coming to an ideal weight. There's a kids class, which I know you want to talk much more about, and we certainly will. There's a limited income class. There's a Spanish class, which I can't teach because I don't know Spanish. I might be missing one. There's a class that doesn't involve cooking. And so the Food for Life class is, for most of the classes, they're 2 hours, although I run them as 2.5-hour classes. The kids class is different, okay? So I'm just talking in general besides the kids class. What we do is we meet and we have a discussion. How's your week been? Any questions? How's the cooking going? How are you feeling? And then we do a nutrition lecture, and the lecture is standardized. The whole class is standardized, actually. So Neil Bernard has a video lecture. So I put the DVD in and let people hear the lectures on a variety of topics: problems with dairy, bone health, how to make sure that is there such a thing as not getting enough protein for many people, and what to do to make sure you're getting enough nutrients, and a wide variety of topics. And then we have a quiz. There's usually 3 or 4 questions, and we discuss that. And then we go into the kitchen, and I make typically 3 dishes, all no added fat, whole food, plant-based. Students in my classes, I try to cap the classes at about 20. Once I just had so many people who wanted to take the class that I allowed it to go a little bit more. But typically I have, I'm most comfortable around 10, 12 students. So there could be more intimacy. So then the students get to eat, ask questions, and then I send them home with recipes. Also, the Food for Life program gives them a lot of content. They can sign up for the 21-day Kickstart, which begins the first of each month, where they would then get email and guidance to help them in adopting a whole food plant-based diet. But the key thing about Food for Life is it's evidence-based. So many of us are ethical vegans or environmental vegans, but in the classes we focus on scientific evidence about the benefits of whole food plant-based diet. And we share that with them so that they could then take that and run with it. And I tell you, Ron, it's one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. I'm not exaggerating, but every single class I take, I get at least a few people who say that it's life-changing, and usually all or most say they significantly benefit from it, but a few people say it's life-changing. I often have a past student come to help me kick off a new class, and just to share, take 10 minutes and share what they got out of it and what the students might expect. And in fact, I've had a number of students who have taken the class more than once because they've enjoyed it and they wanted to go through the journey again with with another team of people and see the material again and continue to grow as whole food plant-based adopters.
Well, we're big fans of Dr. Barnard, and Dr. Barnard actually is an advisor on our board of advisors for PlantPure.
I know.
So we're huge fans of the Food for Life program. And I'm curious then, with the Food for Life program, is that what started you down the path of looking at schools and how to maybe implement something similar in schools?
Yes and no. I've been teaching in schools for many years. I've been teaching part-time classes. I am often called to give a lecture. Typically, it's a lecture, and until I became a Food for Life instructor, the lectures usually have been. I have a standard talk I give, Why Vegetarian, and I can give that anywhere from half an hour to 3 hours. It has lots of details, and my talk covers, all the key areas: environment, ethics, and health, and taste. How wonderful, how easy it is to be vegan. Let me take a quick detour and mention one thing which I like to say. It sounds like I'm bragging, and I guess I am bragging, but I brag just to show off how easy it is to be vegan. I've known my wife about 14 years, something like that, and I blog about food. I don't know if you'll list my blog, dilipdinner.blogspot.com. And in the 14 years I'm the primary cook in the family, I've never repeated dinner for her. It's all 100% vegan, and since I became a Food for Life instructor, it's almost 100% no added fat, whole food, plant-based vegan. So, if I can do it, I'm not professionally trained as a chef. Others can certainly do that.
Wait a minute. Before you move on, did you just say you've never repeated a dinner? So meaning every night for dinner, you've had a different meal for the past 14 years.
Check out my blog and you can get some evidence that that's true.
Wait, say your blog again, because I know people are going to be looking for this.
And I'm sorry for bragging, but again, I'm doing it, I think, for a good reason. And I'll give you the blog in a second. Let me just balance that with, I don't want to overstate it. I'm not the world's best cook. I think I'm good, reasonable, but I think I'm pretty good at being creative with food. My blog is my name, Dilip, like Philip with a D, D-I-L-I-P, dinner, dilipdinner.blogspot.com, D-I-L-I-P, dinner.blogspot.com.
Okay, now you can continue. How did you take all your experience and bring it into the schools?
So a lot of the classes I had been teaching in schools would be, I do an annual workshop, for example, at an area high school where I lead a discussion of children from around, teenagers from around the state it's an ethics workshop on ethics, so animal rights. So I do that. So in that talk, I talk a little bit about why plant-based eating is good for you, but the focus there really is on ethics, not related to health. But since I became a Food for Life instructor, I now had some proven classes. I'm certified in Food for Life. We get monthly training and we get together every year for additional training. So I had a very distinct vector to bring into the school. So I've been doing that. Not this year, but last year, I was teaching in a middle school and I was teaching quarter-long classes, which I guess were 11, 12 weeks long, something of that nature. And Food for Life is a great program, but it's not enough to fill 11 or 12 weeks, twice a week, an hour, so 2 hours a week. So then I reached out to Amy Hamlin, who's, of course, one of the leaders in your program. She's done so much good for so many years for the schools and for veganism in general. And I asked her, and she was able to share some material that she uses in teaching that she's put together in New York. So I supplemented my middle school classes. I did some of the Food for Life. I did the whole Food for Life curriculum, the kids' curriculum, and I added to that some of the material from the wonderful work she had done. And then I also borrowed from other materials, some multimedia. I borrowed from Forks Over Knives and George Eistman. I miss George. He passed away recently, but George has some excellent digestible work that I could share with students and other material. There's just such a surfeit. There's such an abundance of material about veganism available that it makes it easy for people like me who know a little bit about teaching to share with others.
Yeah, walk us through some of the topics covered in the program.
So in the middle school classes?
Yes.
So in the middle school classes, I had more freedom. I'm careful, especially with the younger children. I'm careful with ethics because I don't like to get into ethical discussions. And I make it clear, not just with my young students, but with my older students. I present lots of evidence for a whole food plant-based diet, but I make it clear that the only people who know what's best for these kids to eat is their own parents or their own guardians. I'm not about to get up there and say, you should stop eating dead chickens, and then have a parent say, well, but this is healthful. But what I do though is I do send email to the families. In the middle school classes, I tended to do it every week. So, hey guys, this is what we did this week. These 2 lectures, we covered, bone health. We covered diabetes. We covered the epidemic of diabetes. We talked about some evidence of how we could prevent, manage, and maybe reverse diabetes through a limited fat, whole food, plant-based diet. And these are some of the references you may enjoy seeing. I sent your children home with this document about diabetes. If you didn't get it, here's the soft copy. But it's up to the parents to decide what the kids will eat. I'm a little bit, I wouldn't say heavy-handed, but I'm a little bit stronger with my message with adults, right? Because adults are emancipated. I homeschool my daughter, so we've been talking about the Emancipation Proclamation, and I told her, you're only 8, but one day you'll be emancipated, and we talked about what that means. That's why I threw that word out there. But with adults, I can be more direct. So some possible topics for middle school might be, what do you do in the kitchen? What are some fun things to do with different ingredients? We talk about the power plate in all my classes, right? So fruits, legumes, vegetables. We talk about, grains, whole grains. We talk about those 4 parts and how really that's what your plate should be consisting of. We have some games and projects. I have my students look at environmental impact, for example, in middle school. So we have them put together a meal that they might have enjoyed in the past or are still enjoying or see other people enjoying.
I'd love to hear more about the Healthy Snack Program, because just the name, I love the name Healthy Snack Program. I'm curious to see what it's all about.
So independent of plant-based eating, I don't know how many of your viewers have children or are spending time with children, but kids nowadays, the kinds of food that they're often exposed to, if at all, a lot of people come to school with no breakfast whatsoever. It may be because the parents don't have money or the parents are busy. It's tough getting to school on time in the morning. And then we have people who eat heavily sugared foods, high fat foods, animal foods. These don't necessarily result in the best learning outcomes. And I can tell you that independently of teaching plant-based cooking, because I've been teaching on and off for many years, and you see it in kids. It's not the role of a teacher to constantly be entertaining children, and that's not what teachers want to do. They want to impart good information and, of course, be interesting. But when you have children who come not prepared to learn, when they're hungry, or they're eating low fiber foods, so they keep getting hungry, or they have the sugar high, and a lot of them understand these issues. They say, we know, about the sugar high, and we know we shouldn't be eating sugar, but they still are. And so I saw a need for something to address that. And one of the schools I work with, I proposed maybe a healthy snack program. And the head of the school was very generous, and he gave me carte blanche. He said, this sounds great. Why don't you do it? So I arranged for some donations. I told the school I didn't want them to have any expense in this program, at least the first time around, the first year. And we just finished the first year 2-3 days ago. So initially I worked most closely with one classroom, a second grade classroom. And I had the most wonderful second grade teacher. She was great to work with, very easy to work with. And I brought in an Instant Pot. I love my Instant Pot. I actually have 3 Instant Pots. So an Instant Pot is an all-in-one cooking machine. It's a pressure cooker. It's a slow cooker. It's a steamer. It's a yogurt maker. And if you want me to later in this discussion, I'd be glad to talk about yogurt, because for about 1.5 years now, I've been making yogurt regularly, and people seem to really like my yogurt. Of course, it's fully plant-based and very low sugar and low fat as well. So I got her an Instant Pot. I got her the groceries that I thought she might need. I gave her a check to buy more groceries. And I sat down with her after school one day. We found a time. She was anxious to get started, so we got started within days of her interest. I brought my daughter. So we went to the school after school hours and with ingredients. And I gave her a document I put together, which talked about the rationale for why we might do this, some evidence, a page of evidence about why this would be a helpful thing to consider. background on the Instant Pot, and a variety of other pieces of information. And then, of course, recipes. I gave her half dozen or 8 recipes. And the deal I made with her is I'm going to give all this to you for free, and I don't want, but what I do want from you is to commit to at least 2 or 3 days a week making a healthy snack for the kids. And my goal was that it should, because teachers, Ron, I'm sure you know this, teachers are underpaid, and I've never or very rarely met a bad teacher. The teachers out there are just wonderful, but they're underpaid and they don't have enough time. So my goal was that a teacher shouldn't have to take more than 5 minutes of prep time a day for this program. And the Instant Pot allows for that. I allowed for a little more cleanup time. So maybe after school, they could clean the utensil, maybe throw it in the dishwasher. But I wanted them to spend no more than 5 extra minutes, right, of prep time. And I even gave them a little bit of money to help to compensate for that extra time. And then some of the dishes that I suggested they make are oatmeal. So I don't know if you've ever had pressure cooked oatmeal. It's really yummy. 20 minutes of pressure cooking, and use your favorite plant-based milk. Maybe you can use a ratio of 1 to 2, 1 to 3. Depends on your taste, like thick oatmeal or thin oatmeal. If you don't want it so creamy, then a little less plant milk, some water. I like soy milk. One of the things in the program too is I tried to design the program so it was gluten-free. Now, in Food for Life, we don't feel there's issues with gluten unless you have a gluten sensitivity. But for most people, gluten probably is a healthful food, whole grains. So, but still, the program I designed was all gluten-free, nut-free, because this school, for example, doesn't allow nuts, with the option, if they wanted to use walnuts, if that particular classroom had was okay with walnuts, and they were, so they could use walnuts, and largely soy-free, although they made soy yogurt. So they could use some rice milk, or they could use some oat milk, or they could use soy milk if they wanted, if they didn't have any issues with soy. So I gave them a easy recipe for oatmeal, so easy. So all you do is you keep your oats, on the shelf there, and when school starts, you dump the oats in, you pour in a little bit of milk, soy milk, rice milk, almond milk, whatever you choose. If you're nut-free, then you wouldn't do the almond milk. If you're soy-free, you wouldn't do the soy milk. Maybe a few dried cherries or cranberries, some cinnamon, and then you press the button, which would be porridge, and that's it. That literally was a minute or less of prep time. And then when it's done, you can just open up the pot and everybody could enjoy. I also gave them recipes for main courses, some brown rice dishes, some lentil dishes, and a variety of other dishes. And I wish that it weren't me speaking. I wish I had my kids in the class here, because you wouldn't believe their enthusiasm, Ron. You wouldn't believe that they were just so excited. And I did the Food for Life curriculum, and later on I can tell you a little more about the curriculum, but I came in and I'd visit every few days and just see how things were going, and I would just peek in and say hello, and I didn't want to interfere with the teacher's plans. But reasonably frequently, I would give a talk about any number of topics. How are things going? What's pressure cooking? And I would, from a second grade point of view, talk about, how you can cook under pressure. And I would talk about why is it important to eat many fruits and vegetables of different colors. We talk about phytochemicals. I'd say, can you all say the word phytochemical? And, describe what some of these things meant and what they would mean to their health. And they loved it. I got feedback from a number of parents who would email me directly, because I would put together, a couple of paragraphs every time I made an appearance in the class for the teacher. Her name was Miss Lauren. And she could pass it on if she chose to, and she usually did. I think she always did, to the parents. And I told the parents that you can always use me, contact me and see if I can help in any way. So I got feedback like, my child never eats oatmeal until she learned how you do it at the school, and it's great. I got feedback that my child is asking for more and more plant-based foods. We're not really vegan, but it sounds good, and the food's good, and we're trying it at home, and it's good. I had, I teach a lot of adult classes too. And so I had one of my students, she told her mom, you've got to buy an Instant Pot. And to be clear, Instant Pot isn't the sponsor of my classes. I'm not pushing Instant Pot, and I tell them that you don't have to use this equipment. I just happen to find it's very useful. So one of the children told her mom, you've got to buy an Instant Pot, and you got to take Dilip's class. And she did. So her mother enrolled in I have a 3-week pressure cooking class We meet for 2.5 hours times 3 weeks, and we make all sorts of great things.
What are some lessons you said, man, if I could redo this, I would start with this first? What are your lessons?
One lesson I learned, and I'm thinking about how to work it, is it's important to customize your teaching to the grade. So the Food for Life curriculum is ideally meant for slightly older than second graders, but I used it and I modified it so it would work for them. And I always seem to get good feedback in class, but I haven't talked to the teacher about this yet, but I got formal feedback forms I gave to them, got it back. And the feedback was great. They all said the food was wonderful. And the results were good. I think I just looked at the forms a few days ago. I think all or almost all of them were eating. They said they were eating far more plant-based food since they've been exposed to this. But one thing, many of them, and it surprised me how almost everybody said it, I wonder if they colluded, is they said more cooking and less talking. So, whenever I was in their class, I would, I wanted to expose them to things. And so I'm not sure how to internalize that comment yet. Should with second graders it all be demonstration and while I'm cooking, throwing out things? I didn't get that comment in the middle school classes, though. They seem to enjoy it, and they like the mix of talking and preparing. So know your audience. And one thing I've been thinking of, Ron, is to either myself or hire somebody to take some of my curricula ideas and customize it to different grades. So, for example, have a kindergarten version of maybe Food for Life. And I can't do this because the curriculum is owned by Physicians Committee. So I've already sent the question and see what we might do. But beyond Food for Life, other things I teach. So a kindergartner but doesn't have the same attention span as a second grader who doesn't have attention span as a middle schooler. So I have a little bit of experience here because I have taught even at the preschool level. And at the preschool and kindergarten level, it's much more tactile. Here's a purple fruit. Here's a purple cauliflower. Here's a green apple. Isn't that cool? And that kind of thing. And then maybe they don't do the cutting, but somebody else does, and you quickly put something together, and you just kind of plant the seeds. So that would be one lesson: is make sure you know your audience and customize what you're doing to that audience. And then another lesson, which it's not that I learned, but this is what I did in my classes, is, as I said, to remove impediments. So somebody might say, well, plant-based cooking sounds good, but it's expensive. And of course it is. And you can go and buy bulk food, rice and beans, and it's really not that expensive. So to clear up misconceptions, to have an open dialogue with parents, and not to be dogmatic. So some of us in our lives maybe are very strong animal rights activists, and that's great. I'm also an animal rights activist. But I would argue with children, this is not the place for that. There may be if there's a class in middle school where you're talking about environment and ethics, middle schoolers are very interested in righteousness and, morality. But you have to be very careful, especially with kids, because, they're not emancipated, they're kids. So be careful with that. So I think it serves me well to stick to evidence-based, because the evidence is just so powerful for whole food plant-based diet. It's consistent, if you eat that way. It's consistent with not hurting animals, right? Helping yourself hurts, helps the planet. So I would, stick to facts. If children ask, of course, you could answer questions. In fact, one thing I did, I hope I always had humility towards the classroom teacher, and I always, worked with her as best I could. So I offered her towards the end of the session, towards the end of the class, the school year, Ruby Roth's book, Why We Don't Eat Animals. And I said, if you want, this is something, we didn't really talk much about ethics, but if you choose to, it's available to you. And she appreciated that. It turns out the class already had looked at that, but they kept my book for, a week or so. And I think some of them looked at it on their own as well. So those resources can be made available. And I think it's really important. What I do is to defer to parents. And I did that. I didn't do that on every single email, but I would say, we talked about cancer and how animal foods and how fat can fuel cancers. And here's some evidence. I didn't give footnotes to the second graders, but I did in my emails. But then I would say, but of course, the best people who know what the right food is for the child is really the parents. And I think that's really important.
How many parents came to you saying, hey, this isn't right for my kids, or I'd rather you not talk about eating more vegetables or fruits? Did you get any pushback?
I'm so glad you asked that, because I expected to and I didn't. So I guess in the elementary school, I was less likely to get pushback because they were given all these things. And They didn't have to participate. They did have to fill out permission forms. So as a Food for Life instructor, I do have a form that says, we're going to be doing these things. I'm going to have very clean hands. I'm going to do all I can. But when food's involved, sometimes people, there could be some reactions. And so I wanted to be sure people knew that, they were taking the risk. So everybody readily signed the form. There was no issue there. So in the middle school, in the elementary school, I didn't really expect pushback. I thought there could have been some pushback in the middle school because we talked more than just nutrition. We talked about environmental impacts, ethical impacts, and I was very careful about talking about that. I respect people's religious views and philosophical views. I don't want to get into a discussion, you shouldn't eat meat. Well, the sacred book tells me that I'm allowed to, and I don't like to go there. I'm happy to go there with adults one-on-one or, with adults in a lecture or something like that if they choose to. Those kinds of discussions, what I like to do with those kinds of discussions is my good friend Rin Berry. Of course, he passed away as well a few years ago, but Rin Berry's book, Food for the Gods, is a great source. And I say, for people who ask, if you're interested in religion, then please look at Rin Berry's book, which is a great source about what world religions have to say about plant-based diets. In middle school, because we were going a little further, I thought there might be pushback. But even there, I was very clear. I said, we're presenting these topics, and it's up to you what you're going to feed the kids. And I didn't get any pushback at all, which was great. Nor should I have, because I didn't do anything to offend anybody. I never pointed to somebody. Howard Lyman, I think Howard's one of the best speakers of vegetarianism. Howard says, when you say to somebody, you should be a vegetarian, you should be a vegan, guess what? There's 3 or maybe 4 fingers pointing back to you. Maybe I drove to this particular location. Driving isn't the best thing in the world. I live in a bigger house than I need to. So who am I to tell people what to do? We can lead by example and share what we know works. Since I don't have that approach, I don't think I'm a confrontational person. I don't think in my teaching I would get that kind of pushback.
Sometimes we have teachers that come across a roadblock, or school administrators, or someone, or parents that come across a roadblock. Well, my school didn't want to do this, and they feel like they're the norm, right? That it's typical for a school to say, well, no, that's just not the way we do things. When actually there's a lot of change going on. You have just demonstrated. You're one example of many that we're sharing here in the summit.
Can I quickly throw out another success story?
Yes.
So this school that we're talking about, and I don't want to take any credit, but the only credit I'll take is to make them aware of it. So Physicians Committee offers an award called the Golden Carrot Award, and it brings with it a cash award. So guess which school got the highest award and got the Golden Carrot Award this year?
Was it yours?
The school that I teach at, that I'm doing this program at. And again, I don't want to take any credit whatsoever. It was the principal and the nutrition team who kind of put it together. I was there and I suggested it, and I maybe did some help. But good for the school, and they got a good piece of money. We got the money matched, so they got a good chunk of change, and they got acknowledgement. And in fact, their nutrition head is being sent to, I think, Atlanta next month, for a nutrition conference that Physicians Committee is putting on for school folks. So that's another success story that, at least I'm aware of, and that I had maybe a tiny bit to do with.
Well, thank you so much for your efforts in the community, and we look forward to learning more and sharing that ongoing. We're going to have many more summits.
Wonderful.
To share information.
Thanks for doing that.
And I want to thank the audience here for joining us on this great opportunity to learn from Dilip and all the work he's been doing right here in North Carolina. So thank you. If you want to learn more about the efforts of the Coalition for Healthy School Food, just visit healthyschoolfood.org. We have all the resources there for schools. And if you have questions, you want to find more resources maybe that are not posted there, you can also ask questions on healthyschoolfood.org. And PlantPureNation.com has a lot of resources for people that are interested in the plant-based movement, from recipes to even meals. We have our PlantPure meals that are available. We have hospitals that are actually implementing our meals as treatment. That's how powerful the science is behind it. Again, thank you, Dilip, for your time.
Thank you so much.